Okay. So the etymology that is the word, right? The
Yeah.
etymology
Yeah.
of tenacity is today's episode. Uh, I don't remember the definition off the top of my head. So if you have it pulled up,
Yeah.
I'll let you read it.
Yes.
But excited to get into. We were talking a little bit before we started recording that our takeaways are built
Might
around the
be.
same thing, but could be different. So yeah, what does tenacity mean, and then what is its root? Where did it derive from?
Yeah. So the meaning of tenacity is pretty neat in that I actually there's three different definitions. I thought that I was going to look it up and get the second definition first. So the first definition is the quality or fact of being able to grip something firmly. It's grip.
Okay, grip.
Second is probably the quality that you and I think of, maybe most of the people watching this, the quality or fact of being very determined. And then the third is the quality of, or fact of continuing to exist or persistence. Um,
Mm.
and then as far as the etymology is concerned, it's another great French Latin guy based off of the word tenacite, which I actually
Oh,
don't know what
nice.
tenacite means because, quite frankly, I didn't look it up before this episode started, but I know that it was French. But tenacite means basically the ability or your determinate, like your determination, I should say. So it's more in
Mm.
alignment um, with that second
Yeah,
definition. But regardless,
being
I was
determined.
actually really, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I had never even really heard of tenacious being associated with like grip or holding.
Grip. It makes a lot of sense when I after reading it or hearing it. I'm like, well, yeah, tenacious. That's like grit and like the holding fast type of definition. When I was looking at like the origin of it and the root word, how it goes back to Latin and then it gets just like borrowed, I think, across cultures. But the root word of it meaning to hold fast, I had
Yeah,
never thought about it in that way before. That it was like, oh, you're
same.
being tenacious. I think of tenacious as like tough guy, like can take a hit and just keep going and will just like, which when you think about it, holding fast, that it can mean that, but more of the thinking more from like the determined type of perspective as opposed to grip strength.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. What is
So I well, sorry, I think you were about to go into this. I think it would be helpful, just because this is only the second time that we're doing an episode like this. Um, I think it'd probably be helpful just to revisit kind of what we're doing this for, and kind of what you and I hope to take away from an episode like this. So, essentially, these etymology or virtue series, these are kind of just taking whatever our theme is, whatever our challenge is, whatever our book club of the month is, and kind of taking a word that might encapsulate that or sum that up. And since you and I kind of have this theme of this month of overcoming resistance,
mm-hmm.
we decided on the word tenacious, which now actually looking at it might actually not even be the best uh, word associated with overcoming resistance. But basically, what we hope this episode does, or this type of episode does, is kind of force us to have to reflect on kind of words that we might throw around or use in trying to live an intentional life,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of really have to dive deep. So I kind of interrupted you, but you were probably going to ask me something along the lines of that question.
Of the yeah no, it's good to go back and kind of explain it, because from here is like we talked about the etymology of it, where it derived from, what it means. Now is kind of going into not necessarily a philosophical overview of it, but what it means for you, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is what I want to get into, because I think with the topic of managing or overcoming resistance, I think this is a great word.
Yeah.
I also, because you held up the Slight Edge book, that book is amazing.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that more next week.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, what is now that, so talking about tenacity, what does that mean for you as far as personal definition and actionable toolkit, like how to utilize
Yeah.
that in your intention?
Yeah. I think like if you would ask me this for whatever reason, and I think from our conversation before this, I don't know your takeaway, but I think that it might be kind of interesting to hear where you go with this too. I
Mm-hmm.
think before I really dove into the definition of it being about gripping, I think I would have told you kind of that definition of like toughness, fortitude, which it is, right? Because sometimes you need to be tough and you need to be fortuitous to hold fast. Um, but like I really started to think about my life over the last couple of years, or really just my experiences with being tenacious. And I think there's like I really love this idea of grip. I don't know why. Like I just it makes it so much more applicable, and I think it makes it so much more of a thought framework you can almost have. And here's how I would describe it. So there's like how I would grip this jug and walk with it. Like if this hydro jug is a outcome that I want to achieve, or a achievement that I want to accomplish, I'm holding on to this and I'm carrying it. And some days this might be really heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some days it might take a lot of fortitude for me to grip this hard enough to carry it. Um, and I think that's more like, I think, John Eldridge describes this idea of like, as a modern man, like staying in a job you hate, or doing that workout program you hate, as like modern warrior training for your heart. I think that about that first idea of like gripping something to carry it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that requires a lot. That's a lot more defined by kind of this trudging forward and like cutting a path, which might not even make sense. I'm still trying to kind of articulate this, but maybe the other half will make it make sense. And then I think about about the other side of it, which is this holding on, like holding on to a flagpole in a storm or something.
Mm.
It's like you are, or not even that. That's actually not what I mean. Like holding on to like coattails of a greater being, right? And you can talk
Mm-hmm.
about it being God or whatever. You can talk about it being your purpose. But I think like I'm no longer holding on to carry something, but now I'm holding on to be carried, right? And I think that
Yeah.
that is the level of tenacity that, when I really think about like the breakthroughs I've had in my life, it's like I've held on to something greater than me, and I've been carried, and then I've been like dropped off, and I've been able to look back and say like, oh wow, I actually grew a lot in that
Mm-hmm.
season, right? Like, I work at a startup. I work at a purpose driven startup that I'm really missionally aligned with. It sucks sometimes. And it has caused me a lot of pain over the last year. But I held on. Like I white knuckled my way through the tough times. 2023 for anybody in the labor market was tough. In the
Yeah.
startup world, it was tough. If you worked in commercial real estate, which I don't, but like that's another example of it being like white knuckling to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think about that. It's funny. I sat out on my patio today because it's for some reason like 70 degrees in February.
That's really
And
weird.
it's lovely. I was sitting out there just kind of reflecting on this, and I was like, wow, like those are the two models of tenacity that I think of. It's like you have your tenacity to have whatever you're carrying in one hand while you cut a path with the other. And then you have the tenacity where it's like you're just holding on and like weathering the storm and being carried by something greater than you. Um, so I don't even know what that means really.
Yeah.
Like, but that's what stuck out to me when I was reflecting on it.
That's
Um,
good. I think that's good. I think it's even good that you don't know that. That's just kind of like, I'm just figuring that out as I'm going along,
yeah,
because that second the second part of what you're saying was my takeaway from it. So, I mean, I don't have to spend a lot of time like re-explaining it, but the idea of initially thinking of like being tenacious. I said this earlier, was like, yeah, you're like this tough guy. If you're in a fight and you keep getting hit, you get knocked down, you just keep getting back up. It's like, bro, you don't know when to quit type of determination, right? And then like seeing that it means to hold fast, I started thinking of like being in the midst of a storm and you kind of don't know what's going to happen, but you're like, even if it's not right in front of me, the answer or the light at the end of the tunnel or whatever it's called, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get through it, even if I don't know, even if I don't have proof that I'm getting through it. And so, like, the more I thought about that, it came back to like tenacity. Your level of tenacity is almost synonymous with your faith.
Yeah.
And again, like whatever faith towards whatever it is for you, if it's God, if it's like faith in the universe, faith in a higher power, but something bigger than yourself, I think is what it brought me back to. Is like, you cannot successfully be tenacious if the biggest thing in your life is you.
Yeah.
Because the second that you start to doubt yourself or not be sure of the next step is when everything starts to crumble and like you start to get really unsure of everything. But to be tenacious means to say, I'm like holding on to those coattails of this larger thing that, although I don't have the answer, although I'm not sure exactly what the outcome of this is going to be, I have the faith that I will make it through. So I just have to like hold fast. I just have to hold on really tight. And then, thinking about all the stories in the Bible of like Solomon, and his, not even Solomon, Job, talking about Job and like his whole thing of like, the devil is literally trying to ruin his life to win a bet, basically win a wager against God. And everyone around him is telling him to like denounce God and like throw in the towel, look at your life. And he's like, I'm not gonna, as terrible as this is, I'm not gonna waver. And then, at the end of it, he got back everything he lost times 10. So that's tenacity, is like, in the face of throw in the towel, there's no way out, this is too hard, you're like, no, it's not. I'll make it through this. So that's how I interpreted that. So I feel like it kind of lines up with that, with what you're saying.
And dude, even as you say that, I'm realizing like what I said, like this idea of like holding on so tightly to something. I keep using this water jug, but like this is the closest thing I have that would make the illustration work.
It's better than saying holding on really tight to a Truly can. So
yeah.
that's a whole nother, that's a whole different,
Yeah.
that's why we did the challenge last month.
Yeah. You don't want to hold on that tightly.
Don't hold tight to that.
But as you're talking, I'm realizing like, the second definition is ultimately the right one. I even wrote, and I didn't know why I wrote this, but earlier while I was reflecting, I wrote tenacious fool or tenacious sage. I wrote that in my journal to describe the differences between the holding tightly and the holding on to holding fast onto. I think the fool is a tough guy who can be tenacious and cut a path and hold on very tightly to all these things. But at the end of it, like, life is going to make a fool of that person versus living a life of faith, whatever that means. I mean, personally, I think that it has to be in a higher power, right? Like, it has to be. It could be, that higher power could be like the collective goodness of, sorry, I'm like hiccuping. It could be the collective goodness of people. For me, I think it's God. I mean, I grapple with that. That's a whole other podcast series that we could go into. But
sure.
I think when I think about the tenacious that sage, tenacious person. It's the man or woman who knows like what exactly what you said. Like you can't have tenacity if the greatest thing in your life is yourself. Like if it ends with you, if human capacity and human capability of which only you have the experience, then there's nothing to be there's nothing to hold on to, and B, there's nothing really to be tenacious for.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like a lot of very deep ideas tied up in tenaciousness. Even as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that like grip strength is correlated with mortality, like all cause mortality. So if you have a stronger grip strength, it's a good biomarker for general health and life expectancy, which is pretty neat to think about. Like when you think about the fact that like literally your ability to grab and latch onto something, not your ability to pull yourself up, but your ability
Right.
to hold on is what determines your life expectancy. I think there's something there spiritually
Wow. Yeah.
too, to be honest. Um, can I share one real quick anecdote and then I'll let you have another takeaway if you have one, or we can kind of wrap because I think there's a lot packed into this.
Yeah.
Um, I've been listening to this podcast. I told you about it. It's called Bama, and um, it's all about understanding the Bible from like how it was written in ancient, or more specifically, the Old Testament, how it was written from like the ancient Hebrew texts versus our kind of Western
How it's
conceptual
been
understanding
interpreted.
of it.
Yeah. That
It's
sounds
super neat,
crazy. Yeah.
bro. So, but today I was listening. It was this morning on my way into work. He was talking about how in Genesis 1, every single part of Genesis 1 contains the same refrain. So every day, in the evening, or there was evening, there was morning, it was good. There was evening,
Yeah.
there was morning, it was good, or whatever. The only day in creation in the poem of Genesis 1 uh, that doesn't have that refrain is day 7. And
Mm-hmm.
this scholar that was talking about it was saying like, because it's very possible that day 7 is now, that God did all that he had to do. And the reason why we don't interact with God is because God rested and we
Yep.
have existed in God's rest. But the whole narrative of the Bible and the whole narrative of creation, and again, if you're not a Christian, then bear with me. But even then, I think
Yeah.
thinking through it through this lens to say like, oh, God said like, just trust the story and hold on. I think
Mm.
there's a lot to that. Um, I don't think I really said anything too valuable that you can add to your tool belt about being an intentional person today,
Oh,
but
okay. No, I'm glad that you brought that up because I did have, and this is why I said in our Discord chat that this might turn into a like a faith-based kind of episode because just because of how the definition spun for me. And I think it spun for me in that way because I've been, I mean, like I grew up in the faith and stuff like that, and then I had my own stuff to figure out, right? Like it was all explained for me, and I was kind of forced to go through it as a kid. But then I had to like really experience it and come face to face with it for myself and say like, do I accept this? Do I believe this? And then ask myself again, like, wait, do I though? But like, do I though?
yeah,
So I'm in a place where I'm always kind of back and forth with my faith. This has, I think, been an opportunity for me to see I've had success in the past few months with the things that that we're striving for, that we're trying to accomplish, trying to be better people, be more intentional, be more disciplined, incorporate positive habits, do all the like self-care, personal development stuff. And I'm like seeing that it can only take you so far. And that's why I had that realization that it was like you can't really be tenacious if all you're doing
that's
it for
so
is
good,
you,
bro.
and if you're the
That's
biggest
so
thing in
good.
your life. It was like such a humbling moment for me to read that and say like, oh, tenacity, something that is highly coveted, that people look at as like, man, if you have tenacity, you're like top, your top percentage of people, I feel like is how it's looked at. And the only way you can have that is believing in something bigger than yourself. So
Yeah.
my takeaway that's like, oh, I have to incorporate this and be intentional about that is reconnecting to my faith. And for me, that looks like more prayer, right? More connection, reading scripture, um, and like reading it and breaking it down and trying to really understand what it means and what that means for what I'm trying to accomplish in my life, because it was put there to help with that, for us to have like a successful and accomplished and wholesome life, whatever you want to call it. So it's like doing more than just reading it and being like, all right, check the box that said I read my Bible today. It's, read it and understand it, and like pray for that understanding, I think is how I'm like, okay, tenacity means getting back in touch with my faith so that I can overcome the things that I'm so resistant to.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how it ties back in, I think, for me with trying to this month being overcoming resistance. Our challenge is to take a cold shower every morning. And it's been 7 mornings, and every single morning's just as hard. It's like
Yeah.
that thing that's like, bro, I do not want to do this. But I do love that it's like the hardest thing that I do all day. And
Yeah.
it's the first thing that I'm doing. So the rest of the day is like, bro, I took a cold shower this morning. I don't want to hear it. I don't even want
Yeah.
to. I don't even want to go.
For
Don't
three
even go there
minutes
for 3 minutes.
or four.
This morning was 4. This morning I did 4. I was like, what's wrong with me? And then how good you feel after. That's it. That's the example, is how much you don't want to do it. And every morning it's the same. It's like, bro, I don't want to do this. This is too hard. It's going to be so cold. I'm not going to be able to breathe. Wah, wah, wah. And you do it anyways because you believe that after it's done, for as difficult as it's going to be, afterward, you're going to feel great. And I have
Yeah.
felt great. Tired early,
Dude,
but
so
also
tired.
fantastic sleep.
Yeah.
Also
Oh man,
fantastic sleep.
I'm so excited
So
to. We're only a weekend. We've got 3 more
I
episodes till we
know,
recap
I
this thing,
know.
and I'm
It feels
I'm
like it's
so
been a
excited too.
month. Yeah.
Yeah, it
But
is. Whew.
anything that you want to say that you thought of before we wrap up? Because I feel like I'm in a good place, honestly.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about this too. Much more of a philosophical episode than we're typically gonna do. Mostly because I felt like I could talk about this without feeling like I was just pulling stuff out of my ass. So um,
Yeah.
that was probably the main difference as far as why we don't go deep on a lot of things. But yeah,
Hmm.
if you're watching this and you're not a believer or a Christian or even a religious person in general, I'm sorry. I
Sorry.
don't know if it was unrelatable to you. I, unlike Doug, lived the first 25 years of my life being kind of an agnostic atheist person. So I am still reconciling a lot of that stuff myself, but I think there's a lot to take away from it. And I think that, I think the stories of human tenacity and spirit and overcoming are stories that God takes a lot of joy in. So that's kind
Hmm.
of the whole reason why you want to live an intentional life. But beyond that, that's all I got.
Well, fantastic. Then next week is our book club episode recapping The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Oh boy, oh
Taking
boy.
a lot of
We could.
notes.
Nice. I've been listening to it.
Mm.
I could honestly do that now and just like run through that, but we won't do that. We'll do it next week. So in the meantime, find confidence in your intention. Trust the process. We'll love you. Take care of yourself. And we'll see you next time.
Toodles.
I always clicked the
Bye.
wrong button.